Good afternoon, and welcome to JAM399. If you want to take a seat close to the front, I think you're going to have a better opportunity to see the drawing tips and techniques later on, but feel free to move up. I should say that I'm a very informal presenter, and I get excited about this topic. So if you find that I'm speaking fast and you didn't catch something, please don't be afraid to interrupt me and just say, "What was that?" There'll also be time for Q&A at the end to ask about how I might go about creating something you haven't seen or other questions. So without further ado, let me just say that I'm Liz Myers. I have a company based in London called Myers Design, and I'm delighted to have this opportunity to share with you some of my top tips and techniques for making icons. Before I introduce myself a little bit further, can I just see who here is already working with any of the free icon sets that Myers Design has provided? Has anybody got them already? A few of you do, but I've got good news for all of you, and I'm going to sit on that for just a bit. How many of you are using any Adobe CS tools, Creative Suite tools, Photoshop, Illustrator? Keep your hand up if you know a little bit about Illustrator. Well, that's brilliant. Oh, that's good. Okay. Tells me what we can do this afternoon. So first, before we dive into the details of how you make icons, the process that you start with Illustrator and you copy paste into Photoshop and you export and optimize and all those good techniques and details, I want to tell you a little bit about my background and strategy, where I'm coming from for making good icons. Believe it or not, I started about 20 years ago at Microsoft when I lived in Seattle. And at that time, we were working on icons. This is where I first learned to create icons for Windows 3.1. Now, I know that this looks really historical, shall we say. At the time, there were only 16 colors. They only went to magenta over there, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, etc. Beyond that, you had to dither the colors or make extra colors you might need out of the existing colors by alternating 2 or more of them, like you see on the bottom here. And we affectionately called the art of making icons like this pushing pixels. And you did it pixel by pixel, and unfortunately, it wasn't very flexible. You had to make them to a specific size for a specific platform. You didn't even have transparency. The developers would tell me, use magenta, because we don't want to use magenta in icons. It's too bright, garish, and you'll just use that as your background color, and we'll make the transparency. Don't you worry about it. So I did. I made a lot of application icons for Microsoft. And here's an example of one where the style was, you were supposed to make them with a 3D perspective and use highlight and shadow, and we're painting with white lines on the left and top and gray on the bottom. And the program manager, that's a close-up of it. That's what it looked like. Now, what I'm trying to do here is make you feel really good, because today, things are a lot easier. We're using vector graphics, and of course, you know that vectors are resizable, and you can recolorize them to fit any platform. So you draw once, and you're starting to build an icon library. In fact, you can use the ones I've already created for any platform. But they're first created for BB10, of course. They're exactly the right size, and we'll go over those dimensions and specifications in just a moment. Now, the icon set that I've just released today and just posted on the blog is at myersdesign.com. It's the newest post, and if you go to the downloads section, you'll see that there are both 250 free icons, PNG files, for you to download and use immediately in your apps, as well as the whole set of master files, or the Illustrator and Photoshop files that I use to create them. And what we're going to look at in just a bit is how you get started working with my master files, how you edit existing icons, how you draw some pieces of your own, and how you start from scratch. But before we get into the technical details, I want to get you ready. Because developers, and I'm one myself as well, I have a couple of apps. So I know how this goes and how the two sides of your brain sort of take over, one or the other, depending on the activity. Now, we all know that the left side of the brain is more the technical, analytical, code-writing, developer side of your brain. This is not a scientific slide. This is just an overview. And the right hemisphere is the more creative side. This is where icon design for me and for a lot of my peers who have written tutorials, I've noticed everybody starts with a sketch. Nobody starts with the computer. Nobody sits down and says, right, I need some good icons. Let me fire up Illustrator. It doesn't work like that. That's like opening Word in order to write the next great novel. It just doesn't happen. Where it happens is with pen and paper. And to illustrate this point, I wanted to share with you just a snippet of a book, a favorite from my childhood. And I have a feeling this might be cultural. How many of you know Harold and the Purple Crayon? Nobody. Well, this might be really American specific then. I didn't think it was. In the UK, they recognized the title. Well, this is brilliant. You'll have to check the whole book out later. I just want to read you a couple of scenes here. This book is all about Harold and his natural creativity. And so one evening, he decides after dinner that he wants to go for a walk in the moonlight. But there's no moon, so he draws one. Notice it's just a couple of lines and he's drawing the moon. Or, in my way of thinking, he's taken half a circle, a geometric shape, and off we go. He wanted to walk along a path, and he drew that as well. But he got tired of walking along this path and decided to take a shortcut through the forest. But just to make sure that he didn't get lost, it's a forest with only one tree. Now, this is rather clever because all of a sudden, a couple of lines, you have a tree, and then he has you believing that's a symbol for the forest. Now, this tree looks like an apple tree, and those are going to be mighty delicious, he thinks, when they're ripe. So he draws a dragon to protect the tree. And the dragon is a bit frightening, so much so that his hand begins to shake, and shake, and shake, and soon he's in over his head. And we have a story here with just 2 or 3 elements. Now he hangs on to the crayon, and he thinks real fast. He's in the flow, and he draws his way out of a jam, if you'll pardon a bad pun. With just a rounded rectangle, we have a boat. Right. See, this is not hard. This is very easy. In fact, it's a sailboat. And we have the primary shapes here of a rectangle, a triangle, and the moon, a half circle. Well, you can see where I'm going with this. He had the makings of an early BB-10 developer, and he sails on to his next app venture. And the point I'm trying to make is, he sketches fast and freely and in his flow. He doesn't stop to say, oh my goodness, is my artwork good enough? Am I creative? How do I use Illustrator? He's just doing this naturally. And we've all done this naturally. We've all drawn a house with mom and dad and siblings in kindergarten. And you've still got that. And my first tip is that you go back to that. I always sketch the icons I'm going to draw first. And I carry this around just in case you want special icons or want to make a request. And I work it out on paper first, and it can be as crude or as simple as these drawings. And I actually save myself time. I don't overwork them, and I keep the icons to the bare minimum. So what I want you to remember is the important thing is that you communicate. There's no right or wrong way to actually draw anything. It's about your creativity, getting into your flow, and communicating. And if your users recognize what the icons stand for and can find their way through your app, then those are good icons. I can teach you about the production process, and I can have you making pixel-perfect, really crisp icons. But the ideas are going to come from you. So, moving along to the good stuff that I know you've come for, the technical tips and tricks, this is an overview of the process. As I mentioned earlier, I start in Adobe Illustrator, and I create vector graphics because they're resizable and flexible for any platform. We keep them in black and white, and then I decide when I'm ready to do production, I copy paste into Photoshop, give them their proper treatment, which we'll go over, and export as PNGs, and then optimize them. So now we're going to take a look at these steps and what's involved. First, I want you to get the right tools. I'm using CS6 today, and in case you're afraid of the cost of an upgrade, or oh my goodness, these are big professional tools, I went online and I did a little research for you in advance, and I found that for 36 euros, you have access to the entire Creative Suite through the cloud. And that's really what I recommend you do, because the standalone products, I looked this up, and to own a standalone copy of Illustrator, I believe, was 449 euros, and Photoshop today is 524, and that's just the two products. You can see that you get a lot more for a lot less, and you'll have access to Adobe Edge, which allows you to animate on device. I'm experimenting with that right now to create animated splash screens. And you'll have access to Shadow, which allows you to mirror your application on all your devices at once and check out the layouts for the different orientations. So I really think that that's the way to go. Of course, you can use the techniques I'm going to show you in other packages. In fact, I've drawn a few of these graphics in Keynote or PowerPoint because we're making use of basic geometric shapes. Another thing you need to get, which I consider this portion of the presentation setup. These are the things you need to go out and get when you get home, and you'll be ready to start doing this. You have to download the style guide. And as a matter of fact, I just saw a tweet that the style guide is new today. They just published a new one. And as a matter of fact, you can see in the very bottom right, they're also issuing a few icons that come from BlackBerry. I say, for the record, modestly, mine are better. And the reason I say that in all honesty is those are only the PNGs. I'll show you, I did a little comp. I'll show you how to make a quick comp to see them on a dark background and see what's there instantly. I not only looked at them earlier today, but I noticed that they didn't make that many, or they haven't published that many yet. So I'm sure it's a matter of time. I'm sure they're building the library. I like the fact that I'm providing the master sets so that you can get at the originals and start to modify them, build your skills, and move on from there. So you must get this later and read up on all the details. I've pulled out the most important pieces for today. When we're talking about app icons, I'm going to show you how to make in-app icons and the large size. That's what I started with, and that's what BlackBerry started with as well, because they're most widely applicable. They go into application menus, the actions bar, the tabs menu, the context menu, the overflow menu, and the top menu. So they're by far and away the most widely used. You don't need to memorize dimensions. They're all built into my templates, and of course they're in the style guide. And I did want to say the medium icons, you might be wondering, what are they for? They're for components according to the style guide. And the smallest icons are little indicators. So like in BBM, when a message has been received or delivered, or you get a check mark, you sent it, but it hasn't necessarily been received. Those are what they're referring to in the small ones, and I think I have a slide coming up that shows that. Now, beyond the dimensions, we're going to talk about the treatment of the icons. So I think the most important part is making them at the right size. And then we're going to talk about weight, that when you see a few of them together in the same space, that some don't dominate, and you're able to adjust and balance a toolbar or balance a menu. Once you've decided whether you're going to use the dark theme, the light theme, or both, then you apply the gradient and the styling in Photoshop. That's actually a gradient filter, and it sits independently on top of the icon, which is really rather nice, because it's very easy to change that and adapt for, as I said, other platforms. Yes, color is also part of the treatment, and this is the screen I was going to show you with some of the BBMs. The color palette for the very small icons is based on traffic signs. So red is for warnings, red is for alerts, yellow is for warnings, and green or blue are for information. Now, due to the fact that about 10 to 12% of the people are also colorblind, remember that when you make icons, you don't just rely on color to carry an idea. You've got to do something else, either with the shape. In this case, the shape is so small, they've really just got room for that square. So they're putting letters or symbols on top of it, reversing them out to add to the meaning. And again, you know, D would mean delivered. And it's interesting, I just realized that must be cultural because that word delivered wouldn't necessarily mean anything in other European countries. Geliefert, no, in German, so that would be a G. So sometimes you do have to make your own icons, although most people do know kind of the English BBM standards and things like that. But that is part of localization as well. Now here's a great one. The Pixel Perfect Precision Handbook. Say that 3 times fast. This is from a design group in the UK called Us2, mobile design firm. I love this. You must get this. The way it's illustrated, it'll take you about an hour to read it, and they've got a lot of good illustrations. And the part that I like best, you get it from that link up at the very top. And the part I like best is where they walk you through and they say, look, you need to set up your environment. So in Illustrator, here's how you turn on the grid. You want to assign a grid line every 10 pixels, and I've done that. You want to turn on snapping so you don't have blurry edges. And they illustrate all this. They go, this is naughty. Blurry edges we don't want. Crisp, sharp backgrounds, those are nice. And then they go and show you exactly what to do. So you have this open next to you. You go into Preferences or the View menu in both Photoshop and Illustrator, and you turn Snap on. It's just that simple, and the blurry edges don't happen. I also want to add, in addition to the subdivisions over here, yes, I have a grid line every 10 pixels, and then I have another grid line, a heavier one, every 81. And that shows me the outer edge of the icons, and we'll see that. It's easier to talk about this when I'm actually in the program. So I just wanted to point that out right there. And also from Us2, they've got scripts that you drop into the scripts folder within Photoshop. So let's say you've just produced 30 icons, brought them over from Illustrator, and now they're sitting in Photoshop in their different layers, and you want to automate the process of exporting them. They've written the scripts that do that for you. And then you have all of your PNG files for your app in a folder. But they haven't been optimized yet. So they found an image Optim, that's what it's called, this little utility, is free of charge on the web, works like a charm, and I want you to get that as well. So those are the technical things you need to get in order to do this. The how-to is coming. I am going to get to a demo. But before I sit down and demo these techniques, I wanted to give you, in honor of BB10, my top 10 tips for designing and creating icons. Anybody, as I said before, can look up these things with these resources, and these facts are all available online. But what's missing is the creative part, the how to draw the icons. You know, in art school, they tell you there are 3 basic shapes. And we have them here. There's a sphere, a cone, and a cube. Now, BB10 style says that we're making 2D icons. So I've translated that into the square, the circle, and the triangle. Now, according to my top 10 rules, rule number 10, we're counting down from 10 to 1. Use the basic shapes. Leverage the shapes. Yes, Illustrator is a pro illustration tool. But you don't need to go near the pen tool if you don't want to, and you don't need to go to that level of detail of moving the levers and Bezier curves. You can, and sometimes I have to, but in 80 to 85% of the cases I'm finding that I can leverage the geometric shapes, and that'll go a long way to creating your icons. In my book, the square and the circle are the primary shapes. The triangle comes from cutting a circle in half, rotating it and cutting it in half. So rule number, the first one I'm giving you, 10, is use the basic shapes and use my basic shapes. The ones in the style guide, it's kind of odd, but they say the basic shapes in the style guide are the circle, the square, and the rectangle. And I'm thinking, but a rectangle is just a squash square. That's not a unique shape. So I'm sticking to my guns on this one. And you can see in common icons like the camera that I used those shapes, just circles and squares over on the right. They went into making this icon. And another tip coming down the pike here, I just want you to start thinking about it, start noticing it, is the power of negative space. It's not just about what you draw, it's what's not there, or what you cut out of the picture. And actually that adds to the visual interest, because your eye tends to fill in those missing details. We'll get there. Oh, rule number 9. Don't hurt me, please. Actually, these are more tips than rules. I'm not trying to be so autocratic. It's just, these are tips. And one is, don't hurt me, please. I once took a mobile design class online with Josh Clark. He's the author of a terrific book called Tapworthy. He's focused on iOS, so it's not exactly BB10 specific. But it's a wonderful book where he collects a lot of apps, and you get a wide variety of design insights from him. And this is one of his. Finger-friendly touch targets are round. They're not square. So try not to just draw a square. Try to draw a square with rounded edges or rounded corners. Try to use circles as much as possible. These are friendlier tap targets. You feel better going after them with your finger. Tip number 8, stick to black and white first. This is also from design school. We were taught to create logos using just black and white. If you don't have a solid concept, color's not going to save you, particularly in BB10. It's all neutral. It's made so that the chrome stands back and that your content is king. And that's what's colorful and in focus and stands out. There's very little color in BB10. So this is an example of this icon. Symbolizes finance or bookkeeping or numbers, whatever you like. It's not specific to being a calculator or something. And it's simply using this technique that I've grown quite fond of cutting pieces out. And don't forget about letters and symbols. And then it works. It works because you're looking through it to the background. It works in black and white and red and everything. Stick to black and white first. Okay, tip number 7. Less really is more. Here again, I'm going after that negative space. In fact, I think with the box on the right that's open, there's actually as much negative space in that icon as there is positive space. In other words, I did very little drawing there. But you get the idea of a box, and your eye fills in for what's not there. One box is obviously closed, and the other one's open. It encourages your user engagement. When the eye has to fill in the missing pieces, you've got people. They're engaged. Just like with the story with Harold. You know, they say he drew the moon, and you want to finish that yourself. He's already planted a seed, and you see the moon, even though it's not complete. Now, we don't have time today to do both application icons and in-app icons. They have a lot of overlap. So I wanted to include, though, a word about those app icons that help focus the eye, help your app stand out on device, and against busy wallpapers that you can't control. And this is tip number 6, is kind of a combo tip. First thing I wanted to tell you is zoom in tight. Try to focus on one quintessential concept that stands for this idea. Try not to mix ideas. I've seen, for the most part, really good icons in apps recently, and since I've arrived to JAM. I've seen a couple instances where too many ideas were packed into one icon, and there were actually 3 disparate elements, and they start to get small, they start to crowd each other, and they send mixed messages, and they're very hard to read. And it's sort of a showstopper. It's like, I I don't understand what that does. Don't know if I'm going to use it or be as engaged with it. So try to focus on one main idea. The other part of this is that I wanted to help you understand that when you make app icons and they're on the outside, again on those wallpapers that can be a little bit busy, try to use one of the basic shapes, either the square with rounded corners or the circle, to establish the space, the place that you own on the user's device. And then reverse out or do your icon on top of that space. I know that there's this semi-transparent gray area that marks the area for each icon. But I'm finding when I change wallpapers that it isn't enough. I still want you to make a solid background and use that for your app icon. And try to zoom in tight on one main idea. And even if you bleed it off the edge, like the London Eye, the Paris Eiffel Tower, you create more dramatic tension in that icon and more interest. By the way, if you feel that these icons are a bit complicated, the London Eye and the Eiffel Tower, you're right, they are. I didn't draw them myself. They came from iStockPhoto.com. And you can find royalty-free and vector graphics that you can download and use in your apps too. And there's no shame in doing that. I consider that a time saver. And often when I think of a city and I find a good graphic, like the Statue of Liberty for my 2 Scoops app, it shows the New York scoop shops, or the Eiffel Tower I used in my app. The London Eye I drew because that was too much detail at small sizes and wasn't so successful at 114 by 114. So I did a simplified version. But I do often use something, I'll pull something from iStockPhoto if I need to. All right, we're up to tip number 5 here. What I want to say is Shift, Alt, Drag are your friends. They are your best friends. Do you know when you click an object and you drag, let's say from the lower right-hand corner, and you hold down the Shift key, what does that do? I can't quite hear you. Yes, it stretches in proportionately, right? So the left and right edges, or it rotates in 45-degree increments. So if you're rotating a shape, you can go at a perfect 45-degree angle or a 90-degree angle. Very good. If I start to draw a circle from the center, and I hold down the Alt key, pardon me, Alt, drag, what does that do? What's that? It's not a perfect circle, it's just Alt drag. It's not Alt Shift drag. Oops, I gave one away. Okay, there you go, you got me. Alt drag, what does that do? There's 2 things it does. Anybody? These are part of your speed tips.
It angles the center of the shape.
Yes, you're drawing out from the center of the shape. So you can make concentric circles, which I'm going to show you how to do that in a moment. What else does Alt drag do? Just in all your applications, you may not know this. If I take a square and I Alt drag, what happens to that square? I don't think that's the right answer. I'm sorry, sir. You have not won the prize. It doesn't exist. Try again? Sure. What was your second guess? Yes? Alt?
You can drag the, for example, circle, and you create something like a pipe.
Well, maybe that's how it works in Paint. I'm just say I believe you. What I'm after here is that you get a copy. You get a quick copy. So if you need 2 circles and you need to cut one up, or you want to quickly make a copy because you like the icon where it is right now, you want to explore something, but you don't want to destroy your work, make a quick copy. Just Alt drag, and I'll show you that. And the last one I gave away already. We all can say this together. Shift, Alt, drag will draw from the center and make a perfect shape, proportionate shape. All right, next tip. Number 4, I love this one. Self-reflection is a beautiful thing. Sometimes when I'm drawing icons, especially if people are involved, it's hard to get symmetry on both half of the icon. So I'm happy if I can sketch something and start to get the hairline and the head and the shoulders and the arm right. Or like Valentine's Day is coming up. Let's use a simpler example. If I can get a nice arc on half of the heart, I'm inclined to reflect that half and join them back together again. And that creates a quick symmetry. Much easier than trying to draw two equal sides. Self-reflection is a beautiful thing. Tip number 3, when in doubt, cut it out. This is also a double entendre. It's meant to be like a cookie cutter. If in doubt, try reversing it. If it's not quite working, I'm finding that this reverse technique, where you're actually looking through the square to see the sofa or the overstuffed chair on the readability icon, I think it works well in both instances. The top one's positive, the bottom one's negative. If I had that icon next to other social media icons that were all square, I think I would choose to use the square version with it punched out to create a little bit of a clean line, top and bottom, across an action bar, for example. Some of you are nodding, so I think you're understanding what I'm meaning by this. Again, cutting out is very powerful, and I'm using that technique more and more than I ever have, really. The other thing, of course, I mean, when in doubt, cut it out, is don't do extras. Don't embellish. Again, if an icon takes you more than 10 or 15 minutes to create, chances are you're overworking it. And I reworked all of the, I had produced 50, I had produced 150, and I'd produced another 30 on my blog. And I had done this over an American Thanksgiving holiday, and I wasn't quite in the work frame of mind. And I noticed when I got back that I was applying gradients, and I was doing all kinds of things that made it harder to use the icons further down the line, harder to repurpose them, and I felt there was too much detail in some of them and overworked. And so I backed off, and I remade them so that they were just black and white, and they were as simple as they could be and still communicate. All right, tip number 2, second to last, let the computer do all the work. Somebody said once that developers are lazy, and I'm not commenting on that. I just think that when you can get the computer to do it, it's really powerful, and it's fun. And I'm going to show you how to do this. This is simply an oval. I use the circle shape, and I drew a petal of a flower, and I positioned the cursor at the center point. And when you do that, you can rotate around that point. And once you've done that once, say at 30 degrees like this one, then on the Mac, you just hit Command-D, which I believe is Control-D on the PC. And you keep doing that until you complete the circle and you complete the flower. So this is very powerful. You can always repeat the last move that you did. If you start doing things in between, you can't. But I'm going to show you that in just a minute. Let the computer do all the work. And last, but my number 1 tip, is don't forget your purple crayon. Remember to sketch your ideas first on paper. This will allow your natural creativity to flow and your right brain to function properly. There's something about hand-eye, pencil, and paper that is simple, clean, and communicative in a way that the computer is not. So it's really important you do this first, then sit down to the computer. Speaking of which, that's what I'm going to do now. Okay, let's make some icons. Now, if you have questions during this, if you want me to repeat something or draw something else or try something new, please just raise your hand or say something, because it's hard for me to look at both at once. So I'm not trying to overlook you, but you're a good group, a nice big group. So we've got microphones, and we'd like to capture the questions because somebody else might be wondering the same thing. Okay, you're not seeing anything, so I haven't switched yet. Okay, here we are in Adobe Illustrator, and this is the icon set that I've published online. I'm going to zoom out a little bit more so we can see that better. There's the whole set of 250, and I just can't resist showing you this. They just went online. You know, my screen resolution here is not too good for me. Wonder if there's a way to fix that. I guess I should leave it 1024 by 768, huh? Is that what was working yesterday? Let's see if it works. Yeah, that's a bit better for me to fit the pallets, but it didn't work for you. So you are the important guests. I'll go back. Fine. That's okay. I can make do.
Okay with that?
Yep.
Okay.
Everybody will understand if these are not perfect. Okay, so on the blog, nice and big there. I can zoom out here a little bit. There you go. That's your entree. Also, under the Downloads menu, you have access to the master files and the PNGs only right here. So that's how you get the icons. But what I want to show you now is how to use them and how to start working with them. So when you open the Illustrator package up, this is what you're going to find. And I recommend starting with the existing icons and modifying. And that's what we're going to do in this demo. And then we'll get more sophisticated with the drawing tools here. Now, speaking of the palettes, let's arrange them so that we can all see them. There are a few of them here. Now, to start with, how about if we take download from the cloud and turn it into upload from the cloud? Or upload to the cloud, excuse me. All right, tip number one here. I'm going to hold down the Alt key, and you can see my cursor change, right? And that means I'm going to get an instant copy of that icon right there. And we're working within the grid. I should say that the heavy lines here are the boundaries of that 81 by 81 pixel area. And the pink area under here is a layer that's locked, and it's marking 57 by 57 pixels. And that's because the style guide says that's how big your icon should be. We need to leave a little breathing room between the edge of the icon and the hot spot here, or the live area where your icon sits. So I try to fit them all in here. And I also try to watch when I'm making icons that narrower ones, like the phone, don't get drowned out by heavier ones like BBM. But that's a refinement. Let's get on to drawing a little bit here. So we'll zoom in so we can see it. I'm using some keyboard shortcuts here, and there are many great tutorials on Adobe TV and books out, like even CS2 speed tips. I forget the author of that, but boy, some of these keyboard shortcuts make you so fast in this, and I do them unconsciously now. So forgive me if I don't call every one of them out, but I do zoom with the space bar and the Command key or the Alt key, depending on whether I want to zoom in or zoom out. Now, what I wanted to do, though, was show you that I had actually reversed this shape out of the cloud. And how I'm going to get at that shape now is I'm going to be curious. And I'm going to highlight the icon, and I'm going to right-click on it. And right-click always brings up a local menu, and you want to release compound path. And that just popped that out of there. Now I know it's there, and so that you can see it, I'm going to color it white for the time being. And I'm going to go next to that bottom right-hand corner till my cursor does that for rotation. And what am I going to do next? To turn that around 180 degrees, what am I going to do? Hold Shift, brilliant. And we're going to turn that right around like that. And we're going to open a window that I love called Pathfinder. I did that, always got this open, but I did that just to show you where this palette is. They're all under the Windows menu or over here in the Tools palette. Now, I'm going to highlight both of these items. And over here, I'm going to subtract, minus the front object. So here's how we're going to punch through the cloud now. Just like that. And that is now one object that you can drag around. It's so simple, isn't it? At the same time, I want to tell you that there is object selection and direct selection. Object selection is me grabbing this and moving it around and having points on all the edges. Direct selection, however, is still possible. Again, the keyboard shortcut here is the letter A, and I'm switching. The letter V is object selection. The letter A is direct selection. You get used to this. When I go for direct selection, I have access to all of the points if I wanted to change the shape of that arrow. And I'm going to undo that because I don't like it. There's lots of levels of undo. You can change that too. I'm just showing you what's possible. If I hold down the Shift key and select multiple points here, even though it's reversed out, I can still affect that shape. How about that? Now, I use this technique a lot. And the reason I wanted to show you that one is because when you find things like the BlackBerry logo, for example, which means BBM, well, that's kind of a pain to draw. At least it's more work than you may want to do. And I've already done it for you, so why do it? If I go ahead and select the object, release the compound path, hit the Option key, drag a copy, all of a sudden you've got your own to work with. I'm going to put this one back so I haven't ruined anything. There we go. And now I've got this one to work with. And what I thought I would do, going back out here, is show you how I made this icon so you can start drawing the shapes as well, not just modifying them. Okay. I'm going to color that something differently so we can see what's here. Actually, let me make it blue for the time being. Now, we're going to use that as our model, and I'm going to go over here and tear off the Shapes menu because I can. At least I could. Okay. It's because I've already selected it. Hang on. There we go. No, hang on. Whenever you see an arrow here, you've got access to further tools below. It's not, is it my mouse? I thank you for the suggestions, but for some reason, there we go. For some reason I missed, and what I was trying to show you was, you just touch that, and you've snapped it out, right? Let's see if this one will cooperate now. This is a bit of the demo gods not liking me. What the heck? Hit the arrow. Got it. Thank you. I appreciate your help. You know what it is? I always have these open. And of course, I work on a ginormous monitor at home. So, back to drawing. We want to make that rounded rectangle shape. And what I want to show you is you pick up the rounded rectangle tool. And of course, when you hold down the Alt key and click anywhere on the artboard, you get an Options dialog. And you can have this thing actually make the icon for you. If you want it to be 57 pixels wide or 56, you can do that from here. And you can control the corner radius. And I'm going to be happy with 4 pixels. You can always change this too. Of course, I can pick up that object selection tool and draw this however I like. I can fill with black, as I'm doing now. And now I'm going to pick up the pen tool. And I'm going to draw this little bit down here at the bottom. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key to get a perfectly straight line and to get a perfectly angled 45-degree angle line like that and make that little shape. Now, what was highlighted was the last point I created, and I moved it up to visually be aligned there across the top. And this is what I mean by let the computer do the work. Don't worry if things aren't perfectly even or straight. There's always a way to align things, and that's a palette over here that I keep open all the time, the alignment palette. Now come back over here and get the selection tool, and just take that and drop it on top of the basic shape I started with. Select them both and choose Join. And now you have one object that you can color and work with. And you must do this. Some of you may be wondering, why didn't I group those two? That would have been just as easy. And the reason I didn't is because when I want to reverse out the BlackBerry logo, it won't work if a shape that's involved with subtraction is grouped. So that's a little trick, that's a little gotcha that you need to know about. Here I'm going to select everything to grab that logo again. And I'm going to take them over here like that. I'm pretty happy with that. And select them both, and I'm going to say subtract. And we got a warning. 2 intersecting paths. Okay, we might have more stuff here than I realize. So, has this one already been joined? No. Are these grouped? No. Should work. Let me color them something else so we can see them. They may not have been on top. Anything that you paste is automatically on top. Where did it go? It's over here. So, to avoid that, let me show you what you do. If you're going to cut something and you want to paste it in place, hold down Command-Shift-V and it will paste it right where it was. So what I should have done, cut it, Command-Shift-V to paste it right back in place. They're not grouped. Selecting these 2 objects and then reverse that out of them, and that should have done it. Yep, I'm seeing up close the pink right through that, and to prove that to you, I'm going to move it over the blue. There we have it. Now, what we want to do is complete the process here. I would like to pick up the point selection tool and move this up a little bit because I'm a perfectionist. Now it fits within the 57 by 57 boundary, and I'm following the guidelines. I want to show you now how to transfer these icons we've just made into Photoshop. Let's grab that one, copy it, and bring up Photoshop where I have a canvas waiting here. Can I scooch that up so you can see it better? I have a canvas waiting here that's exactly 81 by 81 pixels. And all I'm going to do is paste. And I'm going to go ahead and select, leave the smart object selected, because that gives me the possibility to resize this without image degradation. It's amazing. We're now moving from a vector object to a bitmap object. But if you leave smart object selected, you're going to be able to edit this and to resize it without image loss or quality loss. So we'll go ahead, paste that in. Now it tends to fill up the whole area, whatever you've given it. So the first thing I do is I come down to the bottom right-hand corner and I hold down what 2 keys? Alt-Shift, because it pastes right in the center. So to keep that image centered in the image area like you want it, you'll thank me once you start exporting these. You'll find out you want it in the center. Holding down Alt-Shift, I'll drag until I see the numbers fall within the 57 by 57 guideline. Now, I have to be honest, I cheat. I cheat to what looks good. That means both sides there are within 57. So I'll let go, and I'll say I'm happy and hit the return key, and my icon is in there. It's in there on this layer, right here. Now it's black and white. And that's not what we want. We want to apply a gradient to get that treatment. And let's say that we're using the dark theme, which has a black background. I've gone ahead from those guidelines I showed you earlier, the style guide from BlackBerry. I've gone ahead and saved the gradient shades here in the palette, so they're always handy here. And for the dark theme, of course, we want to use the light colored icons for contrast. So I've just applied that, and if I turn on the background, you can see it better. You all got that, right? I'm going to do it again. We're going to go back over here, and I'm going to stop talking and let you tell me what to do. How do I get our new icon here into Photoshop? Don't be shy. It's easy. Come on, the first one I've got to do is what? Copy, exactly. And then we have to come over to Photoshop and we have to paste. Let's turn that one off first. We'll paste. Okay, now what do? Alt-Shift resize so that it fits within what dimensions? That's terrific. Somebody's got it. Brilliant. Yes?
Is that if you see the pixels right next to the image, is that a feature of the new?
Yes, it's a new CS6 feature, and there are a lot of time-saving features for developers in CS6. If I may make a shameless plug, please, for my session tomorrow, we're going to do prototyping with fireworks, and you are going to be amazed at what you can get out of that application, not only in terms of prototyping, but in terms of CSS. It will take whatever you've drawn and generate the CSS for you. And I'm working with WebWorks, so you know, there's always a translation in your brain between what you've drawn and then when you go to actually make the app. And this way, you just copy and paste. So that's a great question. We've got this here. I thought I saw another question in the back. No? Change their mind. Okay. What do I do now? Sorry? Yes, I can copy the effects, but before I do that, I have to hit the Enter key in order to put it down, right? Now you don't see it, of course, because it's a black icon. I told you to make them in black and white, and that's why you couldn't see it. But just as soon as you apply as you hit Enter, you can see it then sitting on the transparent background. And you're right, because I've already applied that effect to the one below, I hold down the Alt key again, you just copy the effect, and drag it right onto that layer, and I've made another one. Now we're picking up speed. This becomes pretty efficient pretty fast. Now let me show you an us2 script that you get when you visit that other, the site, us2.com and then blog. They've produced some nice scripts, and I want to show you both theirs and one that is built into Photoshop. If I come under the File menu, under Scripts, you see at the bottom I've got all of their scripts installed. The one I tend to use is Export Layer Name. So when I'm preparing these for you, and this might help your development if I back up just 1 second, I'm numbering them so I can order them on a canvas or a comp sheet, and I include the comp in the package so you can see what you've got. Because they come in as all individual icons, it's nice to stand back and see the set and pick one, and then you've got the number and the name of it for your code. So let's just say this is number 1 we've made today, upload to cloud. And then this script will export those names for you. And that's your file name. This is BBM. Okay. So I usually do that, so there's no conflicts as well. Do that first. Okay, not being particularly careful at the moment about whether I make one space there or not, but the others I've been very careful to make a nice clean set for you. And now I'm going to export my layers, and it says choose a folder. Where am I going to put these? So I'll make a new folder, and I'll say Jam Demo, create that on my desktop, and just open it. And this isn't going to take but a second. Usually when I'm doing these in batches of 50 or 100, the screen flickers for a moment, or you lose the toolbars at the top, and when they come back, that's how you know that it's done. And you really shouldn't take the focus away from here too soon or go into another app, because you may break the script or keep it from running properly. So let me show you that those have been made. There are your icons. I'll throw away the background. Don't need it. Here's the icon that we just made. Pretty easy, huh? Now those files have not been optimized, and what I'm noticing is when I use the other tool that they recommend, Image Optim, it's called, not a great name, but not a great UI either, to be honest, but it works. So you don't drag, I don't think you drag, yeah, it says drop and drag image files onto the table above. Okay, I guess you do. I thought I just targeted the folder, but never mind, it doesn't matter. Go like this, boom. And now it took 60%, 56, 50, and 51%. And what I love about this is you don't have to go online. So Ping Crusher or Smush It by Yahoo, these require that you have an internet connection. And this I can do on a plane. So that's how to make your icons and your app have a smaller footprint and everything perform really fast. Now I've got about 4 minutes left. Does anybody else have any questions about the process, about drawing in Illustrator? They want me to have a go at an icon they need for their app. It's putting me on the spot a little bit, but why not try it? Any questions at all, please? Yes, sir.
Do you have a tip if you, for example, you need to upload different sizes for the storefront, you need to upload an icon with a bigger size than for you? So the question is, Do you have a tip how you generate exactly the same icon, but how do you export it with different sizes?
Right. That is something I do in Illustrator then. I would have separate files based on the size, because you can only have one grid per file, right? So that would be a different setup. And when I go to make your medium-sized icons or small icons for BB10, that will be a separate master file, and all the small ones will live in there. That's technically how I deal with the multiple file sizes. How I deal with the icons, however, is just Option-Shift-Drag. Now you have to watch. A larger icon may be a little bit too busy to be shrunk down to the smallest size, though they have different purposes, and I'm having trouble imagining right now what would be the smallest size. I can think of one off the top of my head. I've seen the bell as your alarm in the calendar, but it's so simple its shape that it should resize perfectly. And again, if they've done it already, then it's got to be possible. So it's that kind of simplicity. With the BBM logo being reversed out of the shape that we just did, I would say that that is not a good candidate for, and the little tail at the bottom is not going to resize real well. So you'd be better off starting at the smallest size and drawing your icons, standing back at 100% and saying, can I read that? Does it have enough contrast? Do I like it? And then the last thing is to put it into a prototype or an early version of your app and ask users not, do you recognize the BBM logo? Because that's leading them too much. But give them a goal, like, can you fire up BBM? And see, kind of time them and see if it's performing or not. And if not, you know, the golden rule of prototyping, don't make anybody feel stupid. Say, oh, you know, it must not be too evident. You know, let me help you out and show them the answer. And once you know, so that's kind of it's kind of over at that point. You know that you need to do something different. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Okay. Oh, we got a couple more. Good. One right there.
Just on the note of changing icons, what I like to do is once you've exported all your icons to the biggest file size, create an automator application that you can just drag your files in and they'll pop out the other side at 71 or whatever. So create an application that says file resizer 71 pics, 59 pics, whatever pics you need. You can just drag your folder on and then they'll pop out the other side at resized. So that's a nice, quick, easy way of doing it.
Yes, exactly. I tried. That was exactly my question, because I tried this. I wrote a script for Photoshop that exports the icons in different sizes, but I had exactly that problem, that different shapes that looked nice when the icons were big. So I designed them in a big screen, of course, and then I shrink them down. But then the shapes were shrinking down as well, and they didn't look nice any longer. And that was my problem. So. Yeah.
So what I say to this, nice dialogue that's happening over here, and then we'll give this man a chance on this side, is you are following my tip about let the computer do all of the work, but you're also encountering the fact that we need human intervention. So this is both an art and a science. And as I said before, there is no perfect, you know, there's very few rules in design anyway. Right and wrong ways to do things. There's efficient ways to do things. And that's what I tried to show you today. But icon design is just as much art as science. And I like to sketch and then draw in Illustrator, stand back and say, is this working for me? Be your own harsh critic. If it's not, you might have to draw something a little bit different and then export it. The good news I have to say too is I hope that you have multiple apps, and I hope that you're making lots of good icons. On average, I've noticed when helping developers with this that they have roughly 15, 20, maybe 25 icons per app. So it's not a huge amount. You're not doing this in such large quantities that you need to make use of automation to that extent. Hi.
Hi. Is there a button there to press? No? Hello. I just want to ask, is there any advantage, you think, or are people more perceptive to metaphorical app icons rather than having images as app icons?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked that. There are no images, you notice. Please do not try to use images. Those aren't vector graphics. They won't scale well, and there's too much detail in images to be easily read at small sizes, and they're not part of the guidelines. We're talking about vector shapes and graphics. We're talking about graphics.
Thanks.
Anybody else? One more. Okay.
I just want to ask, where do you draw the balance between trying to be unique and trying to use icons that people recognize?
Mm-hmm. That's a really good question. I always try to be unique. Let's put it that way. I also try to leverage what's part of the BBM system. So particularly for Messenger or instant messaging, I'm using the exact same icon. I did hand-eye. I didn't take anything from anybody else, but I did look at and imitate what I saw on my device. I try to change a little something to make it my own. Maybe it's something so small like the depth of the tail or positioning. That's a tough one. But I try to leverage commonly understood concepts as much as possible because, remember, it's all about communication. And if we had suddenly new road signs and you were driving down, over to Hamburg or something, you wouldn't want to see new signs for the sake of creativity. If there's a new feature in your app that somebody wouldn't necessarily be familiar with. Let me give you a very concrete, short example. I drew in the icon set a graphic that symbolizes picture and one that symbolizes photo album. And it looks like a Polaroid shot with a lot of white space at the bottom. And for the object that's in the picture, I just drew a tulip, a very simple flower shape. And I dropped that into my own app, 2 Scoops, which, by the way, helps you find the best gelato in London, Paris, Rome, and New York. So you're hunting for ice cream, you're not hunting for tulips. And when I did a little bit of research and tasted the gelato, as you must do when you're building this kind of app, I was standing in line behind other people, and I noticed that shops like Amarino in France and in London make a flower out of the gelato, and it's so pretty with all the different colors and flavors. The first thing people want to do is take a picture, and then they get to eating it. So in my app, I have a feature that lets you take a photo instantly right there without hunting for the app or anything like that. It's just in the app itself. And it invokes the camera. And the idea is, you press this and you invoke the camera. So I wanted to show the picture icon, but the tulip didn't make sense. I took the tulip out and put an ice cream cone in. Now that's very original, but the outer Polaroid object is very widely recognized. So that's a happy compromise, I think. Difficult to talk about this in the air, but if you check out the app, on the App World App Store, 2 Scoops, you can see it live. If you check out my icons at myersdesign.com, you can get all of those. And if you have any suggestions or need a few icons, please send a tweet to @LizMyers, #BB10icons. You've been a terrific audience. Thank you very much.